This is a little video on this set of Bose 301 Series 1 speakers that was over at a friend's house recently, and he had these down in his basement. He said he got them from a mutual friend who was just throwing them out when he was moving apartments. So I told him, yeah, I'd fix them up for him. They probably had foam rot that would need to be replaced. And I said, yeah, usually, $20, $25 cost of the kit. So he said, yeah, sure, go ahead and do it. So when I picked them up, and he had said that they were covered with some type of a, something greasy or oily or something. We were kind of blaming it on our mutual friend. Then I was just looking at a video on YouTube, and another guy that had a set of these that he was restoring that he had garbage picked, and said same thing. It was coated with some kind of a greasy, oily substance. And he blamed it on maybe they had the speakers in the kitchen, but I'm thinking maybe it's something that's happens with the vinyl coating that Bose put on these things. Or maybe it was just a coincidence, but anyway, that's what two of us have found. These things definitely do have foam rot. I've already removed the foam surround and waiting on parts for replacement foam. Should come today, and I'll go ahead and finish these up. They have this, so it's got like an 8-inch driver there. This kind of unusual looking tweeter over here with this little vane thing. I guess that was to aim the sound out somehow. These things are supposed to sit, apparently, I guess, like this in your room, this being the left-hand side facing the wall. And then I guess you tweak this to get the sound coming out the way you want it. So in there is the tweeter and the bass reflex port right there. Now, one thing these things do have that I'm kind of impressed with is this kind of nicer. If you can see, get the light here. Let me turn this thing sideways. There we go. I'll turn it down. These nicer contact speaker connections instead of the old. I guess the next series, Series 2, they had just the cheapo spring lock style. These are a little bit nicer. Just notice that this one's loose, so I don't have to go in there and tighten it up. You can see this is the left-hand side. And the right hand side over here, and they don't use the traditional spade lugs on the speaker connections. You can see they're actually wire wrapped down to the crossover, so it's a little bit harder to work on them. I guess I could unwire wrap it or whatever, but I just left them connected, and I'm kind of restoring the speaker with it sitting on the thing like that. And here's the crossover down in there. Looks like a pretty simple, first order Butterworth or something. It's got this goofy little light, I guess, that protects the speaker, like a little light bulb. And you can see there's a date way up there that says they were made in July of 1978. So that's the vintage. Both of these are actually in excellent shape. I mean, the cabinets look brand new after I cleaned up all the gunk off of them, and no scratches. The foam was, or the foam speaker covers. One's kind of brown. The one that wraps around is brown, and the other one that covers the woofer is black. They had a little bit of dust on them, but I just soaked them in water and dried them back out, and they're like brand new. They haven't deteriorated at all. And here I kind of diagrammed out the crossover. So that's kind of what it looks like. See, it's the tweeter, it's just got a regular capacitor, a resistor, I guess, to take the sound down to balance it out with the woofer. And there's a little light bulb protection circuitry. And then on the woofer side, it's got a coil there and a parallel 9.1 ohm resistor going out to the woofer. So that's about it so far. Later on today I'll get the parts and we should get these back together and be able to hook them up and see what they sound like. I got the parts for these Bose 301 Series 1 speakers, the refoam kit from Simply Speakers. That's where I ordered it. And this just glues right on there like that and makes the speaker new again. There's really two ways to do a refoaming job. One method is where you cut out the dust cap and put shims in there to center the voice coil. That's how I used to do it when I first started refoaming back about 15 years ago. But I just discovered this method by Simply Speakers, and I think Springfield Speakers does it the same way, where they use a faster setting glue and they leave the original dust cap in place, and you just kind of hand center the voice coil and glue on, you know, the outer suspension, foam suspension, with a faster drying glue. That makes it easier to self-center it. That's really pretty easy. It works pretty well. I've done about 3 sets, and you know, it works great. And I like the idea of not replacing the original dust cap to keep the speakers looking and performing as original as possible. So I'm not going to show this on a video because Simply Speakers has a number of how-to videos online on their website if you want to see how it's done. So go there and check that out. But I will go ahead and do these here, and only takes about an hour maybe to do both of them, and it's the advantage of the faster setting glue which they give you as part of the kit, along with instructions on how to do it. But really the online instructions are the way to go. So I'll come back after this is done. It's about a couple hours later, and the re-foam job is all done, and the drivers are mounted back in the cabinets. So I'll probably wait overnight, let these things fully cure before I plug them in and try them out. Well, it's the next morning, and I've been listening to these Bose 301s. And you know, one thing I gotta say is I really like the looks of these things. You know, the cabinets are in beautiful shape. I like the kind of 60s vintage Danish modern look, I guess, that they have. That wraparound grill. The fact that it's 2 different colors. This is kind of like a dark chocolate brown, and this is a black. But you know, I hooked them up, and I noticed a lack of bass. So much so I thought maybe I hooked them up out of phase, and I double checked the phasing, and no, it was right. So I was kind of at a loss to figure out what that was, but started doing some comparisons between these Dayton Audio BR1s that I recently purchased and assembled to use as comparison tests against some of the old vintage thrift store speakers that I was buying. And yeah, there's no comparison. These BR1s just have great bass, even though it's only a 6.5 inch driver versus an 8 inch for the Bose. I'll walk over here where I've got the speaker grills off. So maybe it's not a fair comparison because you know, it is a modern 21st century speaker versus, you know, a 70s vintage. But this is only a 6.5 inch driver. It's bass reflex just like the Bose. It does have a much nicer soft dome tweeter versus the little cone tweeter that the Bose has. But side by side comparison, yeah, the BR1s sound a lot better. I didn't even bother comparing against the Marantz 1515s because they sound even better than the BR1s. But I do have some other speakers that are more the same vintage as the Bose speakers, so I'll go do a comparison between those older speakers and these guys. When I was waiting on parts for these Bose 301s, doing a little bit of research online, and of course I discovered there's a bunch of Bose haters out there. And you know, I had never listened to Bose speakers before, although I had a couple of Bose products like headphones, and I thought, well, you know, I want to give them a fair shake. And I was hoping they would you know, sound good, and I could come on YouTube and say, yeah, those Bose haters, they don't know what they're talking about. But I can't really say that. These, yeah, they're a little weak on the bass, very thin, and you know, mid-range doesn't sound that great either. I'm not sure what's causing that. But yeah, I brought them out here and did a comparison test with some other speakers that I have here. These are of the same vintage. The three-ways down here are DWDs from the exact same year as the Bose, 1978. You know, when I did an A-B comparison between those two, yeah, the DWDs sounded much better, much fuller, better bass, played a lot lower, mellow, but you know, nice warm tone. These things sounded a bit bright, weak bass, and you know, not tonal quality wasn't that good. So then I really did a, even though this is a bass reflex speaker, so it should play lower, you know, for the comparison size. So I paired them up against these Boston Acoustics A70s, which I recently got and restored. And it's the same size driver, an 8-inch driver, but it's got a nicer soft dome tweeter versus the 8-inch driver on the Bose and kind of a conical tweeter. There it is back there. And comparing these, still the Boston Acoustics had much better lower end, sounded bright, you know, as did the Bose, but you know, just better overall frequency response, much better higher frequency response with the dome tweeter, and you know, better bass response. I was a little surprised at that, since you know, the drivers are the same size, but yeah, the Boston Acoustics did pretty well against the Bose. So yeah, I wanted to say they sounded good, but I think to say they sounded good is you know, a bit optimistic. You know, I'd probably have to say fair. You know, they sound okay. I mean, they're restored. They sound good. Not good, but you know, fair. You know, if you're playing maybe acoustic guitar or symphony or something where, you know, maybe you're not getting a lot of low end, they'll sound okay, I think, if you didn't have something that you're comparing them against. But I like to listen to reggae too, and when you start listening to reggae and you get the bass, I mean, you gotta go with, you know, one of these guys. You know, they just have much better bass response. I wasn't really sure what was causing that, so I actually hooked up my music source here with a function generator, if you can see it there, and did the trick where you know, you vary the frequency down and look for the minimum excursion on the woofer, and that'll tell you what the box is tuned to. And when I did that test, it seemed to show at about 55 Hertz was the box tuning frequency, which is a bit high. Those BR1s, the smaller ones in the other room, you know, they're tuned down to about 38 Hertz. And usually the bass response is somewhat above the box tuning frequency. So if these are tuned to 55, that means, you know, maybe the bass response is, you know, about 60 Hertz would be the cutoff. Which for the Boston Acoustics, you know, the cutoff frequency advertised on those is 40 Hertz, which explains, you know, the better bass response. And of course, on these bigger DWDs of the 12-inch woofer, it's probably maybe down around 30. So, you know, I would hook up some music and play it, but, you know, I've seen other people do that on YouTube, and Now I'm just recording this with a cheap handheld point and shoot camera, and the microphones are probably kind of crappy on it, and I'm not sure what YouTube does for compression. And then when I'm listening to stuff on YouTube, it's usually on a little laptop or smartphone or something, and speakers and those are no good anyway, so I won't really do a sound test on this, but that's kind of what I've discovered so far. I think I'm going to have my son and daughter-in-law come over, and I'll do a blind A/B comparison between a couple of these sets of speakers and see what they say. Since they have younger ears, maybe they'll hear different sounds than I will. But more to come. I know I said on the earlier segment I wasn't going to play any sound through these things, but I decided to go ahead and show this box tuning frequency test that you can do. And all you really need is just a music source, and I'm just using a little laptop here, a little pad, and you can download one of these, or it's just online really, tone generator. You want to set it to generate a sine wave, and you can see if this will focus. That's where I got mine, and then you hook your laptop computer up to your amplifier down there, and just play it through the speakers. And I taped a little piece of tissue on there so make it easier to see the cone response on the woofer. So what we're going to do is tune this up and down in frequency until we see a minimum excursion on the cone, and that will be the box tuning frequency, which is really set by the size of the box plus the bass reflex port, the diameter and the depth of that port. So let's go ahead and give this a shot, see what we come up with. I'll hit play, and here you can see the speaker moving. There's the higher tone. See, it goes down to a minimum there, and then after you get lower it starts moving more again. So what you're looking for is that minimum movement between low and high. So it's let me see if I can get it where I think it might be. I think right about, I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but I'm thinking right about there. So you hit stop, and then you look at the frequency that it shows, and it's 54 hertz, which is about what I said. I think I said 55 before, but somewhere in that frequency range is where the box is tuned to. And I'm also getting kind of a strange sound coming out of this reflex port here too. I'll play that. Not sure what that is. That might be maybe one of the crossover components is loose and vibrating inside there or something, but that's kind of unusual sound. So there's the test if you want to check, and of course this only works on bass reflex speakers where you get that minimum cone response. You can't do it on acoustic suspension speakers like these other guys, just because they work differently. So it's a good test if you want to measure your box frequency on your bass reflex style speakers. Now here's a quick update on these Bose 301s. I may have been a bit harsh on my assessment of these guys earlier today. I've been playing them pretty much all day, so they've got about 8 to 10 hours of music playtime on them, and the sound has improved quite a bit. They had probably sat down in storage for at least a decade, maybe two. So I think the rear spider suspension had probably stiffened up quite a bit. Plus it has that new foam front suspension. So I think breaking them in has improved the sound quite a bit. Still don't have the low bass response, but the mid ranges and the total kind of tonality has improved quite a bit. So I think I'd upgrade them to sounding good rather than just fair, as I said before. I also did a little procedure on these guys to improve the appearance. I'll show you what I use. And I do this on all of my speakers. It's called Howard's Feed and Wax that I put on the exterior of the speakers. Now, I know this is for wood. It's a wood product, and you know, all these speakers are coated in a vinyl, and it's not real wood, of course, but it seems to kind of create a nice luster and kind of even out, you know, the look, the texture and everything, and you know, it kind of gives them kind of a rich look. And you know, I've done all these speakers in the past, and it kind of lasts, you know, and makes them look nice. Even did it on the back, make it look darker black. So there's a hint for you guys. You can try that out and see if you think it works for you. But it seems to work for me. Howard's Feed and Wax. Now here's a little interesting development on the right-hand speaker. While I was playing around with these, I noticed that this little bar that separates the two grill covers was kind of loose, so I pried it up and figured I'd glue it back down. And you know, you can see this is just the you know, the vinyl coating underneath here, and it's just a particle board on the back side of this. Looks like they stuck it down with some type of contact glue. But I noticed here in the corner there's a little date code, July 13th, 1978. So that would only be visible, you know, if you were down here by the tweeter and looking kind of up through this little device here, and you could check that out. So if you're looking for a date code on your speakers and you don't want to pull the driver out to take a look, there you go. I don't know if all of them had this or what, but this one certainly did. So I'm just going to take a little bit of epoxy, 5-minute epoxy, and dab it on here in a couple places and stick this back down again. I was thinking of using wood glue, but I don't know if wood glue would stick to this vinyl, so I think epoxy will stick to everything, so that should hold it down. So there you go, hidden date code. Look at that. Well, I'll go ahead and wrap up this video on these Bose Model 301 restoration video with kind of some of the opinions and what the sound is on these guys and what I think about them. I know earlier I said, you know, I wasn't impressed with the sound quality and bass response, and then I noticed after I listened to these for several hours, you know, they started improving, and I think that's continued to happen. I've been listening to them now for about a week, and yeah, they've improved quite a bit. First I thought maybe that was just my ear getting used to them, but then I started doing some comparisons again between these other same vintage classic speakers, and it's definitely improved. Still doesn't have the bass of either one of the you know, the Boston Acoustics A70s or the DWD 3-ways, but still sounds a lot better. Mid-range tones are sounding a lot better, blending much better than they were before. So yeah, I guess that's a key thing, that if you're restoring some of these, don't just plug them in and say, oh, they sound terrible. You know, give them a listen for a while and let them break in. Now for what, you know, I think you should use these for, you know, I think they have this kind of strange way that they throw sound out the side here at a 45-degree angle. So what you wind up getting is like all the mid-range and the upper bass notes coming out of the woofer out the front. And then you get the lower bass coming out the bass reflex port here at a 45-degree angle, and also the higher frequencies coming out the tweeter at a 45-degree angle, which you can control some up with this little tweeter wing thing. It tends to throw sound out kind of willy-nilly around the room, which maybe you're liking, maybe not. But I think, you know, if you're going to use these things up on a shelf in you know, an environment where you just have a number of people in the room and just kind of a background music listening, then maybe, you know, these would work for that. If you're intently listening to music and you want it coming straight at you, you know, maybe you're sitting on a couch wanting to listen to something, you know, like Molly over there, then maybe you want to go with one of these, you speakers, the traditional speakers with a flat baffle. Now there's, like I was talking about, the Bose haters, Bose lovers out there, and I think a lot of that comes down to maybe the initial cost of some of the Bose products. Of course, it's not a factor for me because these don't belong to me, and the guy they belong to, you got them for free also, so it's not a factor for either one of us. But I like them. I really like the differences that they have. This kind of horizontal shape, the overall look, versus a more traditional shape of a regular speaker. And they're trying to do something different, which I kind of appreciate. And it's a little bit of a conversation piece in that they have some differences that I think are kind of interesting. So I would say between the haters and lovers, I'm probably on the fence. I don't love the sound because it's good, but it is a smallish bookshelf speaker. It's nearly 40 years old, so you got to take that into consideration too. But I really do like the looks, and I'd love to have a pair of these along with my other classic speaker collection. So that's it. Thanks for watching. If you have any comments, please leave them. I'd love to hear from you, hear what you have to say, agree or disagree. Thanks.